Hi, this is Karen, Hollywood Happenings, and today we are with George Grove, one of the original members from the Kingston Trio, along with Bob Shane. And George, who was the other original member of the Kingston Trio?
Well, Karen, I'm not actually an original member, but I have been in the group for 39 years. And did work with the other two original members, Bob Shane and Nick Reynolds.
And is Nick still in the group today, or? No,
Nick died in 2008. So he's not able to be with us. But his son is going to be at the show.
Okay.
And public television at this point. And it has to be filmed and edited and produced and all that before it's sold to any other outlets. But it's being filmed for public television.
Okay, and is that to promote, to get donations toward public television, promote your upcoming album, your concert tour?
I believe that would be Kingston Trio did a public television show, which was sold to PBS, and it was what we refer to as the reunion show, because it was the first time in 21 years that the three original members of the Kingston Trio, Bob Shane, Nick Reynolds, and Dave Guard, had been together since they broke up in 1961. And we also had in the mix John Stewart, who took Dave Guard's place in 1961, and then the other two current members of the group, myself included. And our special guests were Mary Travers from Peter, Paul and Mary, and Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac, and the host of the entire ordeal was Tommy Smothers, of the Smothers Brothers. So we have a long history with PBS and public television, and have normally aired our shows during their pledge period. People call in and have donated, I think, $43,722,000,000, or I could be off by 42 billion or so.
Now, do you got any special guests planned? Like you said, back in '81, you had a lot. Tommy Smothers, Mary Travis, just to name a few.
Oh yeah, we have. We put this out to several of our friends who were influenced by the Kingston Trio through the years, and many of our friends are still active musicians out there on the road, and weren't able to join us. But the ones that are able to join us for this special are Timothy B. Schmidt from the Eagles, Al Jardine from the Beach Boys, Trini Lopez, the Linelighters, let's see, who else? Santa Christian, beautiful young lady. And I know I'm missing somebody, but I don't have any notes.
So what was one of the biggest songs?
Well, there were a lot of great big songs for the Kingston Trio, because bear in mind, in the mid to late 50s and the early 60s, when the Kingston Trio and the folk era was really the biggest thing in entertainment, the only other option that kids had back then that they really aligned themselves with, the young folks, was Elvis Presley. And that was on the rock and roll side. So when the Kingston Trio came to prominence in 1958, they were three young, good-looking college guys just out of college up in the San Francisco area. And they right away, within 1 year, had a big hit on the song called Tom Dooley. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. And after that, quite a few hits followed. None as big as Tom Dooley, but just to name a few: Tom Dooley, The Reverend Mr. Black, Where Have All the Flowers Gone, Worried Man, Tijuana Jail. There were so many songs that became popular, became favorites of people, because back then, people, especially those who were folk music enthusiasts, purchased record albums as opposed to singles. So every song on that album became somebody's favorite song. And consequently, some 57 years later, the Kingston Trio is still able to sell out concerts in performing arts centers all over the country. And people want to come and hear their favorite songs. So that's one of the things this public television show is going to be doing, is permitting them to see on television what they would normally have to go to a performing arts center to see. And we'll be doing all their favorites. with a few surprises.
So, one of my favorite songs, folk songs, was Puff the Magic Dragon. I know that was Peter, Paul, and Mary.
That was our dear friends Peter, Paul, and Mary, right?
Yeah, that was a great song. Great song. Did you guys ever perform that, like in concert or?
No, there's so many Kingston Trio songs in our repertoire that we figured out one time it would take over 17 hours for us to perform all of our songs, let alone covering anybody else's songs. And that 17 hours didn't include either breaking a string or making a potty break.
So how long do you, is the show going to be like an hour, 2 hours?
It'll be like a fully... Most Kingston Trio fans bought albums back in the late 50s and the early 60s, and as a consequence, every song on the album became somebody's favorite. And that's why we're going to be performing at the Avalon Theater on June 21st and 22nd. Is about a 2.5-hour concert with a few surprises and a few guest stars, but we're going to be performing all those old Kingston Trio favorite songs.
So when does your tour begin? Are you going to be?
Well, we don't really have a beginning or an ending to our tours. Because we perform primarily in performing arts centers around the country, then those are usually on weekends. So we'll go out on weekends, we'll fly to wherever the concert is and perform 1, 2, 3, or 4 concerts and then fly home. So, in the old days, we might go out for 6 weeks at a time and before we came home. But this is a very pleasant schedule because it permits us a lot of time at home, and we also get a chance to see our fans all around the country.
What's your favorite place to perform?
Oh, that's really a hard question. It'd be easier to say, what are your favorite venues through the years? And obviously, for any musician, Carnegie Hall in New York City is a favorite place to play. Something very similar to Carnegie Hall no longer exists, but that's right here in my town of Las Vegas, the old Sands Hotel, because that was the same stage where the Rat Pack performed. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Joey Bishop, Sammy Davis Jr., and you realized when you walked out on that stage, you had the same feel that you did when you walked on the stage in Carnegie Hall, because you knew that those masters of song and comedy had walked on that same stage before you. So that was a favorite place to play. After that, I would say that Wolf Trap outside of Washington, D.C. is one of our favorite places.
So, question. With the reality television shows and the stars like Kelly Clarkson, Carrie Underwood, Taylor Swift, getting their start from reality television, how would you say the industry has changed? Has that enhanced it, or is it more hindrance to like the true performers that's out there doing it every day in the clubs trying to get that deal?
Well, the music industry has changed a lot through the years, just as technology has changed. And I don't think that any of the television shows, either the reality shows, things like The Voice, Dancing with the Star, any of those, have either helped or hurt. I guess if I had to choose one or the other, I'd say they have helped, simply because they bring the attention of people to the fact that there are wonderfully talented people out there, entertainers that they would like to see. So I think that the changing panorama of the recording industry is what I have witnessed changing the most over the years. These days, we don't have a record company like in the old days. The Kingston Trio had Capitol Records was the first record company. And in those old days, between 1958 and 1963, the Kingston Trio was responsible for well over 20% of Capitol Records' gross profits. And then came a group called the Beatles. And to put it in the vernacular that Nick Reynolds, one of the original members, said, the Beatles was a freight train you just had to get out of the way of. But in those old days, the Kingston Trio, along with Capitol Records, every star, every major star was aligned with the record company, and those record companies were responsible for putting up a lot of money for sponsoring their tours and getting their records sold. These days, we record under our own record company, and our primary venue for selling records is over the internet and after our concerts. So it's a different scene today than it was many years ago.
So you kind of sell it at your concerts. Do you actually get out, like a lot of the country stars, they get out after the concerts and they try to meet their fans? Do you try to interact, do a lot of fan interaction?
Oh, that's one of our favorite things to do. You know, we realized that after 58 years, the reason that we're out there performing, still able to go out there and perform, is because of the fans. So after every concert, we take long enough to put our instruments down, change into a nice, dry, clean shirt, and then go out to the lobby and meet with our fans. And we're usually the last ones to leave the lobby. You know, we have a good time. Everybody has a story to tell us about where they were the first time they heard Scotch and Soda, or what they were doing when they heard Tom Dooley, or how they used to gather as kids in the basement of one of the neighborhood kids. And they all listened to the records, and then they went out and they bought banjos and guitars and tried to learn how to play the songs. So all those fans have a story that they want to share with you. And all those stories are wonderful, and they're unique, and they belong to the fans, and they allow us to share those stories with them.
Now, how would, like, a lot of your fans, like you said, you've been around like 58 years, so a lot of fans, are they bringing their children to your concerts?
Yep, there's a term that we use now called the grandparent effect. So a lot of, they brought not only their children, and those children who are now grown, you know, they're adults, they have their own kids, they tell us the stories about, yep, every time we got into a car to go on a trip, Mom and Dad would put in the Kingston Trio on the 8-track in the car. And we would listen to Three Jolly Coachmen and Tom Dooley and Where Have All the Flowers Gone. And now the grandkids of those original fans will go visit their grandparents, and they'll go over to the record bin, and they'll look at these strange things, these 12-inch by 12-inch large black CDs, quote unquote. And they'll say to their grandparents, "What are these?" And actually, these grandkids now think they've discovered the Kingston Trio, or they've discovered Miles Davis, or they've discovered Barbra Streisand. You know, and so their grandparents will bring them to a Kingston Trio concert, and these grandkids are so anxious to meet the Kingston Trio. So we gain a lot of new fans that way, the grandparent effect.
And what kind of advice would you give people that's coming out to your concerts or wanting to get into the industry?
Wear comfortable clothing. I would say to any kid that wants to, you know, if some student decided he wanted to play the guitar or play the banjo for any kind of music, whether it's country music or folk music or rock and roll, get a decent instrument to begin with and learn how to play on a decent instrument, because if you get a cheap instrument just to see whether you're going to like it or not, it's too difficult to play. So start out with a decent instrument. Get music lessons from somebody, because that can be the difference between growing discouraged very quickly or having a good teacher who can excite you to the music.
So, like, if I want to learn how to play piano, because I still play like certain notes, I can walk up and I know certain notes. I need to stick with my piano or my keyboard.
Yeah, and find a good teacher that can convey the excitement of the music to you, because music is exciting. The people who wrote music were exciting. People who perform music are exciting. So being able to find a teacher who can convey that excitement to you is very, very important, especially to a child.
What about, because I know back when I was in school and you were in school, music was a big thing in schools, and now that's part of the programs that they're trying to cut. What is the keeping education, music in schools?
Having parents involved. You know, when the parents are the ones who demand of the school board or they can start that by simply going to the teachers and say, well, where's your music program? And the teachers would say, well, you know, budget cuts, we had to cut the music program out. But if the parents get together and they say, we want a music program for our children, that's the most powerful tool that there is. You know, start locally and build to the community, build to the state, that sort of thing. As they say, start locally, live globally. But it has to start with the parents.
So you're performing at the Avalon.
I think it's June 21st and 22nd. It's a Sunday and Monday. And we have some wonderful guest stars. You know, Timothy B. Schmidt from the Eagles, Al Jardine from the Beach Boys, a group called the Linelighters, another one of those great old folk groups from the early 60s. Josh Reynolds will be there. Josh is the son of one of the founding members of the Kingston Trio, Nick Reynolds. And a beautiful young lady named Sana Christian will be performing. And Trini Lopez. Trini Lopez took a lot of that wonderful folk music and did it in his, I don't even know how to describe it. It's this Trini Lopez style. It's sort of Tex-Mex, you know, with so much energy. So it's going to be exciting to work with Trini too.
Have you ever done anything like with the Children's Miracle Network?
No, not with that specifically. Now, we've done some concerts that have benefited children's groups, disabled children, that sort of thing. But no, not with that network specifically. A lot of times we wait until we're invited to do something. You know, we don't. This group is so old now, 58 years, that there's a certain reputation that it has, and people will call to invite us to do things. So, as a consequence of that, we seldom go in solicitation of anything.
What was the, so you performed like in Europe and things like that, or?
We used to go overseas about once every 5 or 6 years. That was primarily to Japan, because Japan still has a big love of folk music. I think the last time we were there, though, was about 7 or 8 years ago. It's like so many things, you know, the economy has an effect on where you go, and the people that invite you to perform. And it was, you know, the economy in 2008, 2009 was a global depression. It wasn't just a United States phenomenon. So we have plenty of work here in the United States, and have stayed here since that time. We have not been to Europe in probably 35 years.
Now, I read briefly in your bio that you recently got your master's in jazz. Help me out here.
Yep, that's true. I started out in I got an undergraduate degree in piano and trumpet, which for a folk singer that plays guitar and the banjo really hasn't been that handy. Not much demand for folk piano and folk trumpet. So when I joined the Kingston Trio, in about 1979, we were asked by the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra if we could do a pops concert. And our manager said, of course. And then the manager came to me and said, can you write arrangements? And I said, sure, I will. So I wrote the first symphony charts that we used in our pops concerts. And a few years later, we were performing at with the South Florida Symphony Orchestra. And the librarian for that orchestra took me aside and she said, I would like for you to spend the day with me in the library of the orchestra. And I want you to see what it is that a librarian goes through. So I looked at the music, the Kingston Trio music that had come to her, and it had, by this time it had probably been to 40 or 50 different symphony orchestras. And it was all marked up, and pencil markings everywhere, because I think every trumpet player in the world thinks he's God's gift to comedy. So he'd written some sort of a joke or done some sort of a little picture. And she said, your music is in terrible condition. She wasn't talking about the music itself, but the condition of every part. It was all scribbled on. So I thought to myself, you know, I need to do something about that. So I went back to graduate school and got my master's in jazz composition. And that gave me a lot more musical tools to work with. And I decided to go back and rewrite every single song that we had. So then I started expanding our orchestral repertoire to other songs that I hadn't originally done. And now whenever an orchestra calls us, we do a pops concert. The librarian is one of the first to come up to me, and she hugs me and she says, "Thank you for such wonderful music. It's in great condition. We didn't have to do anything." So that's one of the reasons I went back to school and got a great education here at the jazz department at UNLV in Las Vegas.
Later this year for the show, the concert to air on PBS?
It'll probably take somewhere between 3 and 6 months after performances next weekend for the producers to put everything together the way they want it. I mean, it could take less time than that, but I think a good guess would be 3 to 6 months before we see this being broadcast. And again, I reiterate, at this point, it's public television as opposed to any other specific network, simply because it hasn't been sold yet.
Okay. How do you feel about, because back when you guys really started out, it was all the vinyl days, the big old black CDs is what they're called. Now they're just little miniature things. Now they're MP3s. Now you just buy it online.
Right.
But the vinyl is making a comeback. Is that?
But there are a lot of people that say that vinyl, especially they refer to virgin vinyl, which means that the vinyl itself has never been used before for a record. Because sometimes they'll repurpose old vinyl records. I guess they melt them down and make fresh vinyl out of it. But many people say that vinyl has a warmer sound than does a CD. And I think my own take on it is that when I go to a recording studio, I really prefer, as far as the sound is concerned, to record analog and then mix it down to digital. Because there are so many sounds that when you record analog, you can pick up the overtones and the warmth in a human voice or in a musical instrument, the overtones on the piano. And a lot of times that doesn't get translated completely or warmly when you record digitally. But that's just a personal preference. It's based in personal preference and habit, more likely, rather than it is good sound science.
So is there a lot of artists out there like today that's more digitally enhanced? They're not really the greatest singer? And the digital...
Well, without naming names, I think that there are quite a few of today's younger, more modern singers who utilize the capability of music software programs to bring their voice up to pitch when they have a problem with the intonation. And I much prefer to hear a singer, warts and all, any of the problems, because it's a more human sound to me. So whenever the Kingston Trio goes into the recording studio, that's what you hear. What you hear is who we are, and we're not going to enhance it with the music software program.
Did you get a chance to work with John Denver? Because I know he was a big folk.
No, I never worked with him. He came a little bit after, quite a bit after the Kingston Trio. So I was a big fan of his music. What a wonderfly talented songwriter, singer, and guitarist John Denver was. So a website to which people can go and pre-purchase tickets, as opposed to waiting until the night of the performance and purchasing them at the box office of the Avalon, which they can do also. So the Kingston Trio will be in concert on Sunday and Monday, June 21st and 22nd at the Avalon Theater on Vine in Hollywood, right across the street from the Capitol Records Tower. And we will have with us several special guest stars: Timothy Schmidt from the Eagles, Al Jardine from the Beach Boys, Trini Lopez, the Limelighters, Santa Christian, and it'll be an evening that's going to be recorded for public television, which will probably be broadcast sometime this fall, the fall of 2015. And it'll be an evening that any audience member there will not forget, an evening of music of the Kingston Trio. So we look forward to seeing everyone out there.
And that's Hollywood Happenings, live with George Grove of the Kingston Trio. You get to go out and check them out at the Avalon.